Hello, my name is Tyler Carter, and I'm going to discuss the importance of antibiotics. So, a brief history on antibiotics. In 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, but completely by accident. He had petri dishes with staphylococcus cultures on them, and on one dish there were multiple colonies spread throughout except for on one area where a mold was growing. This mold was Penicillium notatum. It secreted a juice that inhibited bacterial growth. The juice could kill several types of harmful bacteria. So Fleming decided to have his assistants extract more of this juice. This juice was penicillin, and it would become the first antibiotic. This discovery was important at the time because there was no real treatment for bacterial infections. Your only options were to hope and pray that you wouldn't die, and many did die without proper treatment. After its discovery, Howard Florey and Ernest Chain took on the mission of turning penicillin into a life-saving drug. Alright, so for penicillin to be useful, it had to be mass-produced, and the UK was unable to do this. So, Florey decided to take a colleague and go to America in hopes that they would be able to find a way to increase the yield and production of penicillin. John Fulton, a colleague of Florey's, decided to point him in the direction of the Northern Regional Research Lab. Here, the researchers were able to increase the yield of penicillin by substituting lactose for sucrose in the culture medium, by adding corn steep liquor in the fermentation medium, and adding penicillin precursors in the fermentation medium. So yield and production increased, but also clinical trials were a success. It seemed that penicillin was yielding the results that they would hope for. It was able to kill bacteria in humans. And so the War Production Board took notice of the pharmaceutical uses of this antibiotic and decided to take it upon themselves to mass produce penicillin in hopes that it would save the lives of soldiers and others who've been hurt during the war. They mass produced penicillin by contracting laboratories to produce it. So the effects of penicillin. Penicillin inhibits the synthesis of the peptidoglycan in bacteria. In bacteria, there is a layer of the cell wall made of peptidoglycan, and with this layer weakened, the cell wall itself weakens, and this causes bacteria to burst due to osmotic pressure, effectively killing them. And although penicillin was extremely important, it wasn't effective on all types of bacteria. So, like I said, penicillin isn't extremely effective on every type of bacteria. It is a cell wall synthesis inhibitor, but there are other kinds of bacteria or antibiotics available. There are protein synthesis inhibitors, there are DNA synthesis inhibitors, and there are RNA synthesis inhibitors, mycolic acid synthesis inhibitors, and folic acid synthesis inhibitors. And these all are pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Protein synthesis inhibitors, DNA synthesis inhibitors, they all inhibit a function of bacteria that causes the bacteria to die. So if you inhibit this function, they won't get an essential resource, and they will die due to this. So that's why they're all considered antibiotics. They all work towards the same end goal of destroying a bacteria. So there have been many effects of antibiotics. Not all of them are good. But when penicillin was introduced, deaths due to infectious diseases dropped. And the average life expectancy increased. And infectious diseases were no longer a leading cause of death, which is incredible. I mean, it turned the medicinal world upside down because now there were treatments for bacterial infections that caused these unsightly and awful diseases, and that were so easily spread from person to person. Now they were no longer able to spread rapidly and destroy hundreds of people and thousands of people. After the mass implementation of antibiotics, there were reports of antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria. This is a major problem caused by antibiotics. If you have resistant bacteria, then the world could be faced with new bacterial epidemics that it was just saved from. Bacteria, unfortunately, are able to mutate themselves to be able to resist antibiotics. Some bacteria will have altered their cell wall permeability, and some have gained a biofilm barrier, like capsule, to protect themselves, so they can grow and without outside interference. And as I said, rise of resistant strains of bacteria could cause untreatable epidemics. This is important because the world was just saved from these bacteria. It would be unfortunate for these new resistant strains to cause problems. And this is why it's very important to finish antibiotic treatment, because underdosing or not finishing your treatment is what gives rise to these antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria. It's important to make sure that all the antibiotics are taken so that you don't end up creating another strain of resistant bacteria. In conclusion, antibiotics are essential drugs that have saved countless lives, and this is true, although they can create problems. They kill bacteria in numerous ways, and there are multiple different kinds of antibiotics. And you do run the risk of creating antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria when taking antibiotics, but it seems that the benefits outweigh the risks as long as antibiotic treatment is completed. There shouldn't be any resistant strains, because if all the bacteria are killed, they cannot mutate to resist. Right, and hopefully, with this knowledge, now doctors will no longer underdose, or if people will complete their antibiotic treatments so that no more antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria rise in the future. Thank you.